I have been reading a lot of mangas this year, and a good portion of them are actually pretty great. So since I really badly want to talk about them, here are 10 of those mangas that I think are either good, great, or outright excellent that you need to be reading. Blue Box is a romance and sports manga about a freshman high school boy named Taiki Nomata who plays badminton and his upperclassman crush who plays basketball named Chinatsu Senpai. Taiki Nomata is the energetic loud high school freshman that you've seen many times before in shonen stories, but I personally still think that his character brings something new to the table. While Chinatsu is otherwise an airhead who's popular among her classmates and team members, it is the part of her that always works harder than everyone else, all for the sake of her one goal, which inspires Taiki to the point he ends up falling for her. Blue Box is a character-driven story where these two completely different individuals somehow end up living together and inspiring each other to do their best in their own separate sports. Although Blue Box sometimes comes across as more of a romance manga than being a sports manga, I do still think that the author does an exceptional job at showcasing both the genres equally. Some of the chapters are entirely focused on the romantic tension and conflict of the cast members, whose conclusions are almost always wholesome, while other chapters can shift the focus entirely to the sports aspect of the story by also tackling some interesting topics related to hard work and determination along the way. That ends up creating this perfect balance between both the genres, which makes this manga a really entertaining read. Blue Box is also great because it's not filled with the same character tropes and cliches that many other sports stories usually consist of. And that's also what I like the most about this manga. The characters are authentic, their struggles even more so, and the best part of the story comes not from the expected hype moments of some tournament arc, but they can rather come from some random practice sessions or the dynamics between the characters, or from the various ways the characters grow through each new challenge, which makes this manga such an interesting read. I did not think a manga could really make you feel the same way about a sports story as an anime can usually achieve with stuff like animation and soundtrack to enhance the experience of the story, but a lot if not all the panels in the manga where some kind of sports action is going on, even if it's just some background practice session where the dialogue is the main focus, you can actually feel the impact and intensity of the ongoing action because of how great the artwork is. This is the longest running manga from all these recommendations in this video with over 110 chapters out by now. But it is by far the one and only sports manga that I have read till now, and I've honestly enjoyed it thoroughly. If you're looking for some good inspiring action sports story with a great deal of romance to add on top, then Blue Box is the way to go. This manga is about the world of filmmaking. Shinichi is a movie addict high schooler. His love for movies is quite extreme to say the least. On a random day in the theater, Shinichi ends up getting possessed by the ghost of a screenwriter named Tenmaku. Together with Shinichi, Tenmaku wants to complete his one final script that he couldn't do in his lifetime, to which Shinichi reluctantly agrees. But before he could even begin writing that final script, Tenmaku has a sudden outburst for inspiration for a new script as soon as he laid his eyes on the popular high school actress Himeki Kurakui. With no time wasted, he forces Hajime to write the script and immediately approaches Himeki to become the lead actress, while Shinichi himself will be the director. And thus, Tenmaku Cinema quickly becomes a story where we follow Shinichi and the gang in their everyday adventures of creating this film by all means necessary. This is one of those rare instances where having high schoolers as your protagonist works in the favor of the story. You see, not every aspiring filmmaker or creator in the world has the most top-end equipment to work with. Take it from a guy who's literally recording this video on a shitty audio setup. This manga recognizes that fact, and the characters actually use various unorthodox techniques and everyday objects to make up for their lack of budget and freedom to do what they want. Not only does it make the characters feel more grounded, but it also creates an inspiring and uplifting narrative about how anyone can create art in this modern day and age, through even the most bare minimum equipment in their arsenal. Coming from the author of the popular series Food Wars, Tenmaku Cinema rips into the nuances of filmmaking unlike anything I've seen before. Any and every topic related to filmmaking, from storyboarding to location scouting to camera work to even the work that goes into prop designing, is detailed in this manga. As someone who's pretty interested and invested in stuff like scripting and directing things, I have a bit of a soft spot for this manga. But I would still recommend anyone who's even remotely interested in such topics to check out this manga. You might end up decide to stay for the beautiful artwork, or for the mystery aspect of this manga, or maybe just for the fun character dynamics. I cannot recommend it enough. Definitely give this one a go. This right here is honestly the most fun I've had while reading any manga recently. Kindergarten Wars is one of those stories where you shut off your brain and just let the story unfold as it pleases. At first, it starts off as a story about a bunch of assassins who have been tasked with saving the kids of some of the most influential people of the country. One of those assassins being the ex-legendary hitwoman Rita, whose main goal in life is to find a handsome dude and date him. The first few chapters of this manga are pretty episodic in format, but it doesn't take long for the manga to turn into an absolutely batshit insane story with the introduction of the other characters and especially the wars that soon take place in that kindergarten. The true absurdity of this manga comes forward and only becomes more apparent with every other fight that our comedic group of assassin teachers continuously run into. This manga is basically a comedy action series that uses a cute and fluffy art style to enhance the jokes. But don't let that fool you into thinking that it's only a funny, relaxing manga with some action thrown around, because the manga goes real hard when it needs to, and the serious moments can really hurt when you least expect them to. The cute, adorable, and most importantly simplistic art style of the manga gives room for some highly intense fight sequences with stunning levels of detail. This manga, with its storytelling structure and especially the paneling, sometimes reads like a work of Tatsuki Fujimoto, which is a style that no one other than Fujimoto really does in the manga industry. That is to say, Kindergarten Wars is kinda like Chainsaw Man and Fire Punch of the shonen manga space, but on a lot less drugs. If that doesn't convince you to check out this manga, then I don't know what will. Ogami Juzo, the legendary and feared assassin, is one scary individual. As a middle-aged and divorced person, Ogami has some regrets about the way he lived his life until now, but it's not like he can really do anything about it. Well, at least that was the case until a genetically modified wasp stung Ogami, and as a result, his physical body turned into that of a middle school aged kid. Due to these bizarre turn of events, Ogami's boss ends up sending him to a middle school for a mission that is connected to the people who created that wasp. In essence, Kill Blue is one badass manga where a 6th grader Ogami with all the assassin knowledge of his older self gets to live a somewhat normal life that he never really got to when he was an assassin. The reason I call this manga badass is because it's literally created by the author of Kuroko's Basketball. This manga definitely has that same action-packed energy that prioritizes entertainment over logic. But that is not to say that the writing of Kill Blue is bad. Quite the opposite in fact. The author clearly put a lot of thought into the characters and the story of this manga. Although Ogami just wants to live a normal, peaceful life, his mission just doesn't allow him to do so, which creates this second premise of how Ogami has to hide his not so ordinary skills and play pretend to keep his peaceful life safe and secure. That is a concept you might have seen before, but it is executed quite well by this manga. The goofiness of the characters can get a little extreme at times, but they are mostly present for the sake of comedy. Speaking of which, this manga isn't gonna make you laugh the same way a ridiculous concept like Kindergarten Wars might, but Kill Blue still does an amazing job at providing some amazing entertainment through its fights and its comedy. To sum it up, it is a genuinely fun read. Right now there's only like 15 chapters out, so you should definitely consider catching up to this entertaining and badass story. Being an adult sucks, but for someone who doesn't even have any fond or fun memories of their youth to look back upon, their current life of work and responsibilities sucks even harder. Tsutomu Chono is that same adult. He doesn't have any aspirations, friends, let alone a girlfriend, and the only thing he looks forward to in his life are his dreams. One day while working in a convenience store and cursing himself for his life choices, Chono comes across a rather strange manga about dreams. Upon reading this manga, he is only filled with even more regrets about his past, and he wishes to experience those days of his youth all over again before drifting off into sleep. That same night, he ends up dreaming about himself in high school, but it feels almost like reality itself. And it's not just that. Every other dream from that point on is a continuation of his last dream, meaning that Chono is somehow leaping through time 5 years ago each time he goes to sleep. Upon this realization, Chono decides to use this ability in order to relive his high school days that he has otherwise wasted away in his past life. Thus, Yumeochi is the story of how a bunch of high school failures get a second chance at reliving and reshaping their youthful days of joy thanks to a mysterious book of unknown origins. Aside from Chono, every other time sleeper, as the manga likes to call them, just so happens to be a girl who also failed miserably in those days of her youth. So yeah, this manga is basically real life, but a lot more horny. The author of Yumeochi has worked on several ecchi harem manga before, so you don't even have to worry about the art style of this manga. While admittedly, this manga is extremely enjoyable for its romance aspect, and the majority of its appeal lies in the fan service alone. To me personally, Yumeochi has been really fun to read because of how the story consistently jumps back and forth between their high school lives and their real lives. The more involved each of the characters get into each other's lives, the more change they experience, and the more interesting the story becomes as a result. There's also a surprising amount of thought put into this concept of time sleeping by the author. Overall, Yumeochi is a very unique take on the harem romance genre, and if anything that I've said so far sounds appealing to you, then go check out this manga. You won't be disappointed, to say the least. Tatsuhiko, a young kid who wants to someday become an animator, gets bullied into quitting his passion for drawing. Fast forward to high school, Tatsuhiko somehow finds himself as part of a band, where he once again begins to genuinely have fun doing something that he has come to love and appreciate. But reality once again strikes him hard when no one comes to their show, and after years worth of practice and performances, everything just slowly falls apart. Now as a college student, Tatsuhiko has become one of those drinking adults that hate seeing other people succeed. But as he was spouting his negative nonsense in front of his college mates, a very drunk girl sitting beside Tatsuhiko mocks his mentality and decides to teach him a lesson about taking things in life more seriously, which somehow ends up working. The next day, Tatsuhiko decides to stop acting so stuck up and heartbroken from his past failures and instead lead a life he can be proud of. A life where he creates something no matter the outcome. This is one of those stories where the main character dedicates himself to following his love for the one thing that inspires him, and I have been loving it till now. Instead of focusing on the specifics of creating animation or music, this manga takes an approach to explore the thought process and behaviors of the individuals behind those creations. Beat and Motion also has some interesting takes on creativity and creative people in general that I think are executed quite well. Visually speaking, this manga is a treat to watch for those cool and artistic pages that are present in nearly every chapter. But I understand it might not be everyone's cup of tea, so the one thing I will without a doubt give this manga props for is the writing. The writing in Beat and Motion is honestly so thoughtful and interesting for its various messages. This manga is apparently so good in fact that Beat and Motion ended up winning in a contest and is now going to be receiving a fucking Netflix adaptation, even though the manga only has like 14 chapters out at the moment. Believe me when I say that this manga is definitely worth a shot for any creatives out there, and especially for people who feel as if they have lost the ability to dream big and follow their passion. In a dystopian future, Tokyo has been overtaken by plants. No one really knows what caused this sudden change of environment, but the one thing they know for sure is that these plants feed on humans to stay alive. Any human who dies because of these plants ends up turning into a jinka, who is then considered as a threat and is incinerated by the flower funeral force. In the middle of this chaos, a young boy named Kingo is doing everything he can in order to survive and to protect his little sister in hiding, who has become a jinka herself. But for Kingo, life remains unfair. Even after all his attempts at keeping his sister safe, her identity leaks into the public, and the flower funeral force was quick to take action. For the crime of keeping a jinka in hiding, Kingo is straight up murdered on the scene. In a last-ditch attempt at saving her brother, Kayano completely blooms into a jinka, hurting everyone who was after her life in the process, before she gives up her own life in favor of keeping her brother alive. Wild Strawberry is a fucking brutal manga. Humans can just get ripped apart and blown up into a jumbled mess of vines and flowers, only to get incinerated in the end. People have been comparing this manga to other highly acclaimed stuff like Tokyo Ghoul, Hell's Paradise and Chainsaw Man, which is a pretty good compliment for any new manga to receive. Wild Strawberry is by far the most visually stunning manga that has come out all year. This manga was initially not even on my list of mangas I wanted to talk about, but then it just came out of nowhere and I was honestly blown away by its execution. For example, in the second chapter, the author just decided to straight up put 4 consecutive blank pages in the middle of the story and practically trolled everyone in the process. The point is that this manga is willing to take risk with its plot, characters, and the execution of the premise, which is something I have to give it extra credit for. This is looking to be the most promising manga out of all the others in this list. There are only like 4 chapters out at the time of recording this, and everything up to this point has been pretty wild to say the least. So since this manga might just pop off in the near future, go check it out. There's really no reason not to. March Comes In Like a Lion, Skip and Lover, and Usagi Drop are all titles that are very distinct from each other in their themes, yet their art style in some ways makes them feel similar. The use of the watercolor texture, the simplistic but fun looking character designs, and the use of those round and curly lines that give off a certain cute and calming vibe, which are all things that together create a perfect slice of life experience. Hirayasumi is a manga that shares the same characteristics in its visuals as these other popular slice of life titles in order to tell a heartwarming story about a carefree adult approaching his 30s and his anxious college freshman cousin who cares immensely about her surroundings. Hiroto is almost about to turn 30, yet his prospects for future seem grim at best. And that is because nothing really happens in Hiroto's everyday life. He's a simple, carefree person who thinks of others before himself. On the other hand, Natsumi is a young art college student who has just moved to live with Hiroto in the city, and as a result, she faces a great time of change in her life. Unlike Hiroto, Natsumi is way too self-conscious for her own good. She gets irritated easily, she overthinks even the most normal everyday scenarios in her life, and she sort of ends up all alone in her college because of this personality trait that cares too much about everything in her life. Hirayasumi is an incredible slice of life story where Hiroto and Natsumi, despite their different approaches to life, learned something new from each other through living together, and with each new chapter, they experience change and grow into a slightly different person than they once used to be. Being a character-driven slice of life manga, Hirayasumi is a well thought out story where even the side characters can sometimes become the centerpiece, and it never for even a second gets boring. Even if Hiroto is a carefree individual, he is definitely not careless. He goes out of his way to help friends, family, and even strangers on multiple occasions. He takes good care of Natsumi and gives her some solid advice based on his own experiences that even the readers can take home. The author put a lot of care and effort into all of the characters in this manga. But the thing is, the more you read Hirayasumi, the more you start to realize that this isn't a story about Hiroto or Natsumi or any of the other characters for that matter, but rather, it's a story about humans. Humans who sometimes act irrationally because of their personal problems, those who might be cunning, flawed, or jealous of others. But most of all, it's a story about people changing and growing as a result of overcoming their own struggles. The characters resolve their internal and external conflicts like actual reasonable humans. This is not a relatable manga because it tries to be relatable. It is a relatable manga because it tries to be real. It tries to convey that genuine human connection that some people can relate to while others can be envious of. That same genuine feeling is the reason I cannot stop reading this manga, and it's the reason I simply had to talk about it in this video. Even if you're not into the slice of life genre, this is a manga that I will recommend anyone to pick up and read just for the experience alone. What is happiness? This phrase sounds like a generic question that doesn't really have a concrete answer. The happiness of a kid is definitely different than that of a teenager. A teenager's happiness clearly differs from that of an adult, and an adult has a separate answer to the question of happiness as compared to that of an elderly person. I Had That Same Dream Again is an incredible story that seeks to answer this question itself for all different age groups, as we follow the story through the lens of a bright young girl named Koyanagi Nanoka who likes to explore places and become friends with some odd figures in her everyday adventures. One of her friends being a teenager who for some reason has a lot of cut marks on her arm. That's odd. Another being a lady that everyone refers to as an abazur, and the last one being an old woman living all alone in the woods in her mansion. This is without a doubt one of my favorite mangas I have ever read. This manga forces you to think for yourself, and it's a story you can learn something from. It is a story where the more you find out about each of the characters, the more you can sympathize with them and just want to give them a big hug of reassurance that everything will be just fine in the end. While the answer to the question of happiness might not be the same for everyone, the path taken to find the answer will almost always contain hardships and obstacles that one must overcome before understanding the true meaning of happiness for themselves. This manga clearly understands that and decides to focus on some of the most extreme cases of people who are suffering the harshest of mental and physical pain that no one should have to endure. This story struck a chord with me unlike anything else I've read so far, and the credit for that easily goes to the brilliant writing and characterization of this manga, but equally enough to the fact that it had a great ending. It's already rare for anime and manga to receive an ending, let alone an ending that some might consider to be great. So trust me when I say that this manga is that exceptional piece of work. I Had That Same Dream Again is based on a light novel title, and it aims to answer a very simple question, only to end up tackling a lot more topics in its journey to search the answer, which makes it a perfect manga to read for anyone even remotely interested in crying their eyes out before hopefully finding a clue to their own happiness. I hope you're in the mood for that. If you don't have the time to catch up to some of the other titles, or just want to experience a great psychological story that is also a short read, then read this manga. You will not regret it one bit. A young boy wakes up in the hospital bed, surrounded by people he doesn't recognize. For a moment he thinks to himself, but he cannot remember his name either. In a situation as dark as this, why does his family react so nonchalantly? Well, it's because they all have amnesia. In this bizarre and somewhat depressing situation, anyone would be in a state of panic. But not the Ichinose family. Even when struck by the most unexpected of outcomes, the Ichinose family picks themselves up and now they begin their new lives together as a put together mess of a family that tries their best to help each other and themselves through their everyday lives by lifting and encouraging them through tough times. But this happy and cheerful facade doesn't take long to crumble into pieces once the Ichinose family returns home and enter their own rooms. This is the moment that Tsubasa and his entire family realized that maybe they were not such a perfect family after all. From this very moment, the manga does not take its foot off the gas for even a second. Every single chapter after that turning point is just a big fuck off plot twist after plot twist after plot twist. And the fact that it's all somehow connected is just some pure mind-bending craziness that it's hard not to be amazed in the long run. I have known the author Tyson 5 from his previous work Takopi's Original Sin, and let's just say I already had some trust issues with the author, as every fan of Takopi's Original Sins does, and needless to say, the author has once again created one of the most interesting stories that I personally look forward to reading each week. This psychological mystery thriller manga presents a story about the fucked up life of a not so ordinary family, where Tsubasa takes on the task of finding out what exactly caused the entire family to simultaneously have amnesia. I love it when a story doesn't treat you like a kid. This manga continuously makes you second guess your assumptions about all the characters and their personalities. Some chapters, you find yourself rooting for Tsubasa and for all his other family members by extension, who are going through some brutal hardships in their lives. But when those same characters decide to flip the table and reverse the roles to become an antagonist, you're simply stuck hoping for the best outcome from this depressingly sad situation. But even after all of that, what makes Tsubasa a compelling protagonist is a straightforward and optimistic approach to solving the mystery and problems that surround him and his family. Even if he loses his path sometimes, he's quick to correct his mistakes and try his best against all odds. There are elements of foreshadowing that begin from the first chapter itself. There is no detail placed in the manga for the sake of the shock factor alone. It is a story that demands your constant attention. I highly recommend you to check out this manga. This is without a doubt my favorite weekly shonen jump manga at the moment. This is also definitely the most messed up manga I've mentioned so far, but if you can handle some dark and depressing scenes, then this manga is something you cannot miss out on. This video was more or less a way for me to gush about some mangas that I've been enjoying for a while now, but I do recommend you to check out most of them if you have the time to do so. You should also consider subscribing. I usually make anime videos and sometimes like to talk about mangas as well. That's it, thanks for watching.